Hi, it's really nice to see you.
It's really nice to see you as well. I'm so excited that we get to be here on the non-pub panelist list talking.
Excellent. Well, you see me outside my front door because my Wi-Fi is terrible. So if I cut out, then that's it. Oh, well, I will be back if I cut out. But this is the closest I can get to the Wi-Fi router.
Well, we'll do the best we can. I think the first thing we need to do, this was Heather's suggestion, is show your door, and explain.
So I'm at number 10 because obviously everybody in the UK lives at number 10 outside of Black Door. So basically, so when moving into this house, we were like, right, let's go find the font for Downing Street. But also, it seems that everybody lives at number 10. Everyone in fiction lives in number 10. It's a conspiracy, a UK-wide conspiracy.
Well, so we're going to talk about this very exciting topic of giving power to the people through games.
Yeah.
Why don't you start, Jess? Tell us all about you and your company and your games and whatever you want to tell us.
Well, let's introduce ourselves properly then. So my name's Jess. Hi, I'm Jess from Descent Games. So I still consider myself to be more of a political activist than a board game designer. But I've had one successful Kickstarter, which was a couple of years ago, which was about breaking into a military base to disarm warplanes. So definitely political. But I'm currently... there are a couple of things I'm working on at the moment. One of which we're calling it a feminist dungeon crawler, but it's diceless, so it's not that. So it's not that dungeon crawly. But the characters are all women. This is something which features 100 fictional and historical characters from history. I just said they were all women. We have one non-binary person in there at the moment. We'd like to have more. Though it can be a little tricky looking for fictional characters which are out of copyright who are gender diverse, but we're doing our best. Plus, of course, there are loads of historical people out there that you think, I did not know about this person. What a fascinating life. Most of which I can't pronounce the names. I'm going to go on a course to learn how to pronounce all of the names at some point.
Well, and I think that was so fun when you were on Girls Drinking Wine and Playing Games, which is the one of the streaming things that I started with a bunch of women from the Tabletop Mentorship Program. You were like, hey, give us ideas, and that was fun to kind of get to be a part of that process.
Well, what's a Kickstarter about unless it's about, joining in and being part of it? You don't want a finished product. You want something that still, needs some putting together. Yeah. But anyway, Sarah, that's enough about me. Let me pass over to you. How are you? What's going on?
I'm great. I am just really so excited to be here and to be here with you talking about this. I'm Sarah from Big Girl Games, and I said this earlier, I'm a big brassy broad with a bunch of unpopular opinions, and I say them very loudly, very often. But I do love this idea of games that can bring kind of this social perspective and maybe political perspective to the gaming table. My big game, and it has been sitting on Kickstarter waiting to start for a while, but everybody said, oh no, first you should do a little game. So I've been working on that. But it's a water-based game. And the idea is water scarcity is a big issue. And so it's a cooperative deck builder, and you're like racing the clock to try to solve these water problems before all of the water in the region runs out. So kind of simplified from the reality, but it's surprisingly, who would have thought pandemic would be fun? But it's so much fun, and I'm not saying my game is so much fun, but it has gotten really good reviews. So I'm excited to keep kind of in this line.
Well, that's part of the point, I suppose. that you need something that's quite straightforward, that's a simple idea, got lots of nuance within it, but it's like one simple thing that people can grasp. You need the elevator pitch, I suppose, for a game to be really straightforward. Then you can put all of the real world nuance in it. Because of course, reality has got so many twists and turns and different things that intersect that you can never have all of that in a game. But you can teach an awful lot through a game. You can teach so many different things, and you can come away with a sense of something. It doesn't have to be a purely educational thing. So sometimes there are games which just give you like one little nudge or one little thing. And I'm thinking about games I've played that are like that. I mean, clearly things like Pandemic. But actually, one of the examples I keep coming back to when I think about this is Flashpoint, the firefighting game Flashpoint, so fairly simple concept, you're going around, you're rescuing people from a fire, etc. The thing that really struck me was that every time I played it, we played it, we had fun, it was great, it's a great cooperative game. Every time I played it, I was reminded to check my smoke alarms. Just because I just played a game about fires. And so I was like, oh, I should really go and check my smoke alarms. And it's that kind of really subtle nudge, I think, that a game can do, that a political game, that a game about a theme that really matters. Yeah. It's really important.
Yeah, I agree. I know we had like an idea of the next thing we were going to talk about, but I just wanted to like drop in the little, like, we've been seeing a lot of little like memes on Twitter, and I laugh every time I see one of these, like, a male character in a game is not political, but a female character is political just by being female or whatever. And so this idea that everything can be educational or everything can be political or everything you can learn or you can get some sort of, I guess it's just part of the experience, right? Like we're playing games for experience, and some of us actually want that experience to include some of those like more real life aspects.
Yeah.
I play very high fantasy stuff, and I'm thinking like role-playing games. And I'm still, trying to get that experience of the politics of the world that we're in, and learn something about the people and their like deepest needs, the other people I'm playing with, through gaming. So
just because something's really high fantasy, it doesn't mean that it can't, teach us something about things. And there are several different thoughts I'm having come into my brain. Right now, I feel like I have too many tabs open in my head, definitely. But one of the, the thoughts that's sort of meandering around there is that my mother always used to tell me that that she could tell when I'd been reading Lord of the Rings, because I moved more gracefully around the house. Because I'd, so it's that kind of, again, it's that little nudge, and you think, okay, that's something I wasn't even thinking of, but I can really imagine that it's probably true. It's that kind of thing where, regardless of whether it's a high fantasy setting or not, you're still learning something about that. So there are things like, think of, so books are really good for this. Think about something like The Left Hand of Darkness, which is a really, really fascinating sci-fi book where there is no gender, so they're all one gender, and they can become male or female depending on what happens during that particular time, and so anybody can. It was really fascinating, and it's like, okay, that's definitely sci-fi, but isn't that a fascinating question? And it's not worth less because it's sci-fi.
Right.
So there are lots of things where just because something is like plus of course you can have things which are set in a sci-fi setting, but they're essentially being educational, or they're teaching us something, something else, sort of semi-deliberately, which makes me think about all the things that we might not realize we're being nudged in, which are not good things. You know, you think about, you know, moving gracefully is fine, and, you know, knowing more about something is fine, and you know, checking your smoke alarms is definitely good.
Right.
But are there things that are nudging us in a, hey, you need to buy more of this stuff way?
Or even, you know, I'm not a particular fan of games that have fighting, like battles. Although at the same time, I have played many, maybe hundreds of hours of Gloomhaven. So I'm not sure I can really say that, you know, but is it real fighting when you're like playing a card and going, oh, I can hit for 4? You know, I don't know. But I feel like there's, and I'm absolutely, I've read the papers. I understand the science. I absolutely believe that games are not radicalizing people like they thought video games would be doing back in the 70s and 80s. But at the same time, I do think that games, especially the really popular ones, do help us normalize certain things. And so what are the things we want to be normalizing? I have a great story about one of the play tests of my water game where there's one fellow in our game group who is that kind of, I hate to say little stereotypical gamer dude. Poor hygiene, kind of mean to everybody sort of guy. And we kind of put up with him because we all kind of feel a little sorry for him. He's a lonely dude. So he was there. We had a playtest group at a big, like, international tabletop day or something. And his cousin was one of my playtesters. And his cousin was so excited about this game. And he's like giving me all this feedback. And then the guy who's kind of problematic walks by and he goes, what is this, some kind of environmental game? That's stupid. And I'm like, well, you know what? You are not my audience. And he walked away. And then I thought, but you know, he is. He needs to be my audience because it's an important topic, but it's also a really fun game. So
yeah. But it's one of those things sometimes where it's like, who's your primary audience and then who's your secondary audience? Because we can't do it all in one go. You know, there's definitely a thing about, okay, let's normalize this by making it normal, you know, and then somewhere along the line, hopefully, you know, the people who are really not interested in it now will become interested, and they'll be like, oh, actually, yeah, that is a thing. Because how do we normalize something except by, you know, standing up and saying, you know what, I think this is perfectly normal.
Right. And Cheshire Kate here is saying, yes, more nonviolent games, please. Less violence, normalization. And so that comes through saying, you know, these other things that we want to play about are normal. And let's do more of that. And it's kind of like this, you know, we have this conversation every time. I think there's room for all of the things. I know that there are people who really get, like, they feel like they can work out their emotions or whatever through these games that maybe are violent, and it's like, this isn't real violence, and so I'm getting rid of these negative things in my head or whatever by going and playing a first person shooter or whatever. But I want to make games that don't have that. Hello. I want to make games that don't have the violence. So
there is definitely that whole conversation about whether things, you know, whether some of those feelings, you know, if you're talking about things like, you know, strong emotions, you know, you're really furious about something, you know, all that, you know, bubbling up inside you. Sometimes it's a muscle and sometimes it's a poison. And sometimes you need, you know, you need to kind of, you know, be taught how to not exercise it, you know, because if you take out the anger, then it gets worse. But sometimes you also need to not bottle it up, and you need to find a safe space to let it out. And the thing is that I think it's different for different people.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. So what are things that board games can do to normalize some of these social activism issues? And you and I talked a little bit kind of backstage in the last day or
We
two
did.
about like how our faith and our ethics kind of inform our game design. So I don't know if that's a direction you want to take it, but yeah, like how are you approaching this to normalize the good stuff?
Well, there's always a big question and a little question, I suppose. So the big questions are things like, what are the actual themes? And we can talk about things like games which celebrate colonialism, but I'm aware that we are two white women talking on this, and that's not necessarily the conversation. That's not the conversation that we should be leading. But just to sort of, put a little flag in that and saying, this is not a good thing. In fact, let's not put flags and things. Flag putting in is generally not worked. Anyway. There you go. I mean, that's the sort of thing with language where it's like, you know what? That's not necessarily the best expression to use here.
Right.
So there's lots of things like, just being aware and pointing that out and coming to that understanding, because I'm certain that there are things which I'm going to get wrong. There are definitely things I have got wrong in the past, and I've thought, oh, maybe, that's not necessarily the best game to do. And oh, that game nudges us in a bad way. Because games don't have to outright celebrate things. I mean, things like the various games which are all about Jack the Ripper. I mean, that has to be done really sensitively. It's not that it's a theme which you can't do, but it's a theme where if you just go in and say, hey, this is, let's just take it and, just paste it on, then that's not having a good discussion about it. That's just using it because you can't think of anything else.
Right.
But there are also small things. So I'm thinking specifically, so my Kickstarter was called Disarm the Base, which was about going into a military base to disarm the warplanes, which was based upon real life experiences. In fact, there are a couple of colleagues of mine who had done that a few years previously.
Oh, wow.
While they were having their trial, was when I was like, kind of coming up with the game. And then afterwards I was like, okay, how did you do this? And they gave me loads of hints and tips for things they do. So for example, the game includes a card which is a plane spotter card, so you can work out which hangar one of the planes is in, because they genuinely got a whole load of information from somebody who was a plane spotter who was just hanging around near the base, who was really pleased to talk about planes and which hangars they went into.
That's cool.
So obviously these friends of mine got caught. They obviously didn't manage to get anywhere near the plane, but they got caught and they got put on trial. And that was kind of the point of the direct action. Like many direct action protests, then it's really about getting yourself in front of a judge and in front of journalists so you can say, right, let's raise awareness of this issue. But when I was thinking about Disarm the Base, one of the key things that I did was that you can pick up objects which will help you to get inside the hangars. You can pick up a crowbar. You can't pick up a gun. You can't pick up a bar. There's no bombs. Well, the warplanes obviously have bombs. That's what you're trying to get rid of.
Right. But you can't pick them up to use them to like do something violent in the game.
You can't interact with the guards at all. When a guard enters a hangar and you're in the hangar, then you're caught. That's it. There's no, you can't fight back, you can't struggle. This is realistic, and that was something that that all of the people I spoke to about the game, the people who are there on the ground, doing piecework, said that's really important. This needs to not be, this needs to not be mistaken for some sort of marine operation somewhere else in the world where it's Bruce Willis fighting half a dozen whatever. That's not what this is. This is about peace protesters going in. So you can get a crowbar, but that's about as offensive a weapon as you can get, and that's only in order to actually break open the hangars. So that's one thing that I did, which I think was a real nudge there.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else which I wish I had done, which I hadn't done, which somebody suggested later, once the game had been done and created and everything. And I thought, why did I not think of that? And that is that in the game, you each have a meeple, which is a different color. So you have there's a yellow one and a green one and a blue one and a red one, and they're all the shades were quite carefully selected so that various types of color blindness you could still tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But the guards are all plain black meeples.
Mm-hmm.
And someone said, why didn't you make them gray meeples or blue meeples? Black is the color that's often used, the black hat versus the white hat.
Right.
So I thought, you know what? That was a really silly thing that I missed, and I could have made them a different color, and I didn't, because I just thought, well, that was what was available, and I just thought, well, you got to make them all one color, making them non-color in terms of black, and it's just like that is such an open goal there, isn't it?
It is, and I'm actually really fortunate in a game that I still have in development that has kind of a pollution theme. That the pollution was black, and the wild dice, it's all dice. The wild dice were white, and somebody said, why don't you make the wild dice something different, just a different color? And I'm also working really hard in that game to make sure that it's colorblind friendly, and have created, the design stuff around the colorblind issues. But I so appreciated that somebody said that to me in the design process and during the playtest, because again, I had just I just hadn't thought about it. And I really, at the point that I was playtesting with those people, it was on Tabletop Simulator, and I had just picked something easy. And I think this is, again, we talked a minute ago about, or maybe 10 minutes ago about, here we are, two white women having this conversation, but it's so nice when somebody can point out where our blind spots are. Yesterday, one of my artists on the Water Game is an Indigenous woman here in the U.S., and she had sent me a panel of Indigenous models and fashion writers and some other people in the fashion industry who were talking about Sephora, the makeup company's Canadian Indigenous Peoples Month campaign. And they did a lot of things right. They hired cultural consultants. They hired an Indigenous woman to be the producer of the campaign. They hired an Indigenous photographer, and then all the models were Indigenous as well. But nobody in the room had dark skin. Every single model was light-skinned, even though they were Indigenous. And so they had this panel about colorism and how if you're in that room and you live within your own bias, maybe you're not always seeing these things. And so I am really thankful that I was able to, change my wild dice are going to be, I don't know what color, but they're going to be some unusual color, and the pollution is going to just be gray. And I want it to be, the theme is dino fairies at this point. It's super silly. It's super cute. And I don't want I want everyone to see themselves in this game of dino fairies, or not see any, not that I don't want people to see differences, not feel like they are left out of it for some reason.
Yeah, that's definitely something where you can have those, you can have those things where we're not going to see everything. We just, so that's why we need to work as a team. We need to tell people about things quite early on, because it's just impossible for somebody, and I'm thinking about myself, and I am, because I'm British, then I tend to put class higher than most other things, because, the UK. So I am middle class, I am well educated,
Right.
I have a secure financial background. I'm not saying we're particularly well off, you can see this, small house behind me, but I'm not at risk of being thrown out on the street at any time. And there is that's a kind of comfortableness, which it's really hard to get past.
Yeah.
So for Library Labyrinth, then we have a team of people who are working on it. It's not just me. I have colleagues for the first time. Yay! So we've got 5 of us who are working on it mostly. 3 of us are white, but 2 of us are not, though we are all British. We've got a whole load of cultural consultants sort of lined up, and I'm talking to sort of, to people about each, culture, because it's set in a library where there's literature from all over the world, so we're talking to historians, we're talking to somebody who's going to sort of do the overall bit, and then we're talking to people, from each culture to say, right, okay, can we, does it make sense to include these people? What do you think? Do these pictures look right?
Yeah.
But it does need us to start from that position where the team itself is not all white, because it's great to include cultural consultants, but you as a team also need to be more than just this nice middle class, well-educated, privileged slice of existence.
Right. And so Unpub, and this is Heather in the background. Thank you, Heather, for helping us with this. But yes, hiring a cultural consultant is so important. And if you're like an individual like me, I don't have a team. It's just me. But right from the beginning, when I started my company last summer, and I jumped, head first or feet first, I don't know which, into the game industry, and put up my website, and I'm like, I'm gonna go be a games publisher, and then got into it and went, oh wow, I really had no idea how much was involved. It is for one person by themselves. But right from the beginning, not just being in my little white woman's silo was an important aspect of my company. It's on my mission statement on my website. I have worked actually for several years with a cultural consultant who's a friend of mine from grad school, who has really challenged me year after year to confront whatever systemic racisms or other isms I embody in whatever way that happens. And so if all you can do is hire a cultural consultant, if you can't afford to have a whole group, or if you don't have collaborators or whatever, at least doing that is such an important step. And I'm so glad to see this becoming normalized. I'm
back again.
Hello again.
My internet keeps cutting out. I keep seeing you and I keep going back and forwards. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
Here I am saying I'm... It's one of those things where you're like, Wi-Fi can be a bit dodgy. We're hopefully moving house in a couple of months, and I am dreading the inevitable trying to get Wi-Fi to work in the new place. And, hopefully that is.
Yeah. It's a constant. It's a constant issue. So let's take a little quick break here and say, folks who are here in the chat, please ask questions. If you have any questions that you have about like this issue, or things that you want to bring up, please do that. There have been some really interesting comments. So I know that you can't see the comments, Jess, but I wanted to
without
read a
going
of
to a
them
different
here.
page, which I can, but actually,
the remover said this: there are a lot of themes that leave a lot behind to fulfill the usual dudes with guns expectations, especially post-apocalyptic themes, etc. And I love that, because I love post-apocalyptic stuff, but why is it always that like the violent men in this in particular, the ones who take over the world? I don't think that that's as realistic. Anyway, so happy to see folks exploring it more. There are more compelling and helpful things to think about in those themes. I so agree with that. And they're saying this as someone who grew up on those themes.
Yeah, just thinking about that. There's a new Choose Your Own Adventure book coming out soon. Alba, which I think is not post-apocalyptic. Well, yes, which is post-apocalyptic, but not dudes with guns. And I think it's coming out from a group up in Scotland. I could be wrong. Go look it up on Kickstarter. I've
Mhm.
backed it on Kickstarter, and I get the updates, and I completely forget what's in it. But I'm like, yeah, it looks good. I backed it.
Nice. That
This is the
sounds
trouble.
great.
You get to Kickstarter, and you're like, oh, that looks great, and that also looks great.
Yeah. Well, and I also want to I also want to address what Game Biologist said here. I once play tested a prototype with some teens where I provided a rainbow of meeples for their use, and when they had to place 2 meeples on a card to show that 2 residents who wouldn't tolerate bears lived there, one of them shouted, "I need 2 angry white people." The only meeple colors in the next prototype were blue, green, and purple.
Well,
oh, yeah. I mean, fair.
Oh.
I really want to know why you wouldn't tolerate bears. But
I suspect that person may have been thinking along the same line as Jasper Ford, who I read the other day, and he's got a book where, so he specializes in really silly books, really silly books in a funny and clever way, and one of the books was about the 4th bear from Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, which was actually a murder mystery, and there were all sorts of things to do with catching various nursery rhyme characters, and the gingerbread man had gone on a rampage. But anyway, there were in fact many angry people about the bears, which was interesting because it was plus it was set in a fairly wealthy suburb of Berkshire, which actually is where I live as well, which is why I was very interested reading it, because I could recognize some of the places. They had a shoot. Well, they had things happening near the shopping center. So I was like, I know this.
Yeah.
But clearly thinking along the same lines. I won't tolerate bears.
No bears today. Oh gosh. Well, we do actually have a question. What would you recommend for hiring a cultural consultant? This is a great question. What exactly is a cultural consultant, and what does that process involve? I can really only answer for myself, Hulda. So my game in particular deals with, we'll say, real world water problems in 3 different regions of the world. And so what I did, I recently completed a PhD in water policy. And so I actually hired 2 women who were in my program. One is Iranian and the other one is Bangladeshi. And because I had one water problem set in the Mideast and one in Southeast Asia. And so what they did, what we talked about was, I want it to be accurate, but it's not an edu game. So any information needs to be accurate. I want to make sure that I am not blaming anyone or placing any kind of specific onus on any particular group of people, and that nothing in my language or behavior in the game comes across as racist, xenophobic, or etc. And so they looked at quite a few things. They looked at some of the cards, they looked at some of the scenario cards and the deck building cards, and they looked at characters, and they just came back to me with recommendations of wording changes and that type of thing, and that's how I approached it. What about you? What do you think, Jess? Do you have any other advice or answers?
So it does really depend upon the different game, because different games will have different things in them. But essentially, so in book terms, then this is a sensitivity reader. That's what they call them in the book world. Not that I know a huge amount about the book world, but one of the team members for Library Labyrinth, they do know a lot about the book world, and in fact, that's why we're doing it. But so the things for Library Labyrinth they're doing are so we have one person who is looking at it overall, who is saying, okay, this is how it looks from a library perspective. Here are how the books work together, because each book features a character, some of them from literature, some of them from history. So we're getting a historian in to look at the non-fictional ones, the historical characters. So there are people who are looking at overall. Then for every character who we can't place ourselves, then we're getting somebody in to make sure that, firstly, we've got a character which people recognize, and secondly, that we have described them, that we've drawn them correctly. So something that I could do easily, and I am doing, will be things like Pride and Prejudice or Vanity Fair.
Sure.
So I can look there and I can say, okay, this is a card which has a picture of, this is Elizabeth Bennet, or this is Becky Sharp, or perhaps it's something like the Lady of Shalott. And I can go, okay, right, this is something that comes from my culture, where I can say, yeah, this is what they should more or less look like. This is what this character, this is how they could look. That's fair. This is, this is a sensible way to describe them. And it's normally just one sentence, because we've got on each card the name of the character, their book they're from, which is factual information. Then we've got, a sentence to describe them. Then we've got this little picture of them. Then we've got some that they'd have, so it might be, that they're particularly clever, or it might be that they're, that they can play a musical instrument, or, something, so every character has got 3 or 4 of those things. So it's basically just getting someone from the culture who'll say, oh yeah, that's what so-and-so can do. Of course they can. Or,
Nice.
That seems like a fair portrait of them.
Or on the other hand, that's not really the right direction, but what if you did this instead? Like, that kind of thing is so helpful, I think. And I do this when I want to like remember a thing that you spurred a memory or a thought. I think a lot of this, the sensitivity readers and the cultural consultants, I think a lot of this is coming out of many years of games being designed by white people, often men, but I'm not just degrading men. I'm just saying often men, because they were the majority designers for a long time in this industry, going online or just, reading a book and going, oh, Incan civilization is interesting, I'm going to make a game. Oh, the Middle East is interesting, I'm going to make a game. And not ever, like, in the end product, then they ended up with a lot of things that were a little or a lot racist or culturally insensitive or whatever. And so I love to see that the industry is going in this direction. I think this is something that is going to make it better over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you do get people who, yes, it's like when you've got a it's like when you've got a TV show that's made in another country, they then come and show your country in it, but they just get everything ridiculously wrong. And you're like, that's just silly. So, the Simpsons go to London, and it's like, I know that you've got to get in all the references, but can you please just, no, it's just not interesting. And it's downright wrong. But it's also, that's also the case when you get, particularly when you get some of these dungeon crawly type games, and you've got 6 characters there, and you've got 2 of them being women, and of course the women are wearing absolutely nothing, and you think,
and all the men are totally covered from head to foot in armor. Yes, that's annoying to me. That's my least favorite thing in the world. Oh gosh. All right, so Jess looks a little frozen, so hopefully we'll get her back here in a second.
I thought this is silly. There are plenty of ways. I'm here, yay!
Okay. All right, we have another question from the remover. How might you avoid reinforcing subconscious reinforcement of stereotypes when dealing with a theme that is zoomed out? For example, dealing with happenings in a North American city where different things happen in different parts of town, not stepping in bad parts of town myths, without erasing realities either. Cultural consultants, one of the answers for broadest scopes of this sort as well. Maybe.
Yeah. Just thinking about it is a start, because once you've asked the question, you're halfway to it.
Agreed.
I mean, the thing is that I think you've got to ask yourselves probably 3 questions here. This is me thinking on the fly, but I still think that there are 3 of them. And you've got to ask.
Uh-oh. All right. I don't know the 3 questions. I wish I did. I wish I was a mind reader across the many miles to London or to Berkshire. But I agree. I think just the fact that you're asking the question is super important. And maybe it is cultural consultants, and maybe it is just bringing in collaborators or hiring people from that area or from different kinds of neighborhoods to talk about the good and the bad. I think that I agree. I think that you can't overlook reality, but I also think that oftentimes we say, like, this is the bad part of town. And we in America in particular, because I can't speak for other countries, represent it often with lots of minority faces. But what is good in those places as well? I mean, people live there. Those are their neighborhoods. So, I grew up on a farm and everybody's like, oh, that's so wholesome. But I can tell you there's a lot of negative stuff out in rural America going on as well. There's a ton of drug use and there's other things that people don't necessarily see. So maybe cultural consultants is one answer, and maybe another is just, doing more research than just a Wikipedia search. Oh, Jess is back. Maybe. I've been moved over to the side, but I still cannot see or hear my panel partner. So one of the things that we had wanted to talk about in our introductions, and then we got to talking, and then you all started asking wonderful questions, was things that are good. Oh, you're back, and the question is still up. So what are the 3 things, the 3 questions that you were getting ready to tell people they should ask?
Yay! So let's see if the internet stays still for this. The 3 things I was going to say, and you might have said these already, are firstly, do you think that you are going to be in Ross, so reinforcing the stereotypes? Mm-hmm. And if so, why are you reinforcing the stereotypes? What is it that, what is it from your experience, that's making that happen? The second thing is, what would people who are actually from there bring? So you're bringing something from somewhere else, but what would somebody who's actually from there think? Because I don't think there's any topic that's really that's completely off limits, but it has to be done by the right people in the right way. And thirdly, I think I had a third one. And I can't remember what the third one was, but I'm sure it was sensible.
But I think
it was something along those lines. Yeah. What are you bringing? Plus, there's a difference between what you're kind of deliberately bringing versus what you're lazily bringing. Because if you just haven't thought about it, that's completely different to somebody who's saying, "Oh, this is an interesting subject. Let's engage in it." The third one might be, do you have to make this game? The game might be fun, the game might be interesting, but is it a game that needs to be made by you? And maybe you should hand on the idea to somebody else and say, you know what, this isn't for me, or maybe this is for me and a team rather than just me.
Right. Yeah, I think those are good questions to ask on any game that you're making that has any amount of political or potentially social topics, themes, etc.
Because you can't get away from politics. There's no neutral in here.
So you're going to be bringing something, the other people are going to be bringing something. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm middle class and well educated and white, and that's what most people are around here, so I'm making games, for my bubble. The political doesn't stop when you say it's not political. Political is basically everything. The personal is political. Real life is political. It's not just what happens in Westminster. It's not just what happens on Capitol Hill. It's not just all of those things. It's this is what happens in town halls. This is what happens in real life. Political stuff is about things like putting your rubbish bins out. That's part of local politics. And it's who goes to what school and where they play in the playgrounds, and and how easy it is to to rent somewhere or to buy some.
Yeah, and John Du Bois says, if you make games in your bubble, for your bubble, that's a political actor choice too. That's so true. I'm
back again.
Hello again. So I think, unless we get some other questions, probably the one thing that I did want to kind of bring us back to, we were going to talk about this at the beginning, and we had like such a nice conversation, but one thing that we had talked about yesterday was discussing things that we think the games industry is doing well, or games are doing well. So what is your answer for that question that we were going to ask each other?
What is stuff that's happening well? So I think the games industry, so we've talked about cultural consultants, and that definitely needs to be on a list. And we've talked about more people in, and that's definitely got to be on a list, because it's not just saying come and look at my game, which I have done. It's about saying make your own game. That's good. But I think the other thing that is really good, so I've been seeing, particularly over the last year, loads of conversations which have been about what you're making your game from and how you're making it, and the sustainability and the environmental impact of the pieces. And there are definitely, there's a real thing about, the environmental impact. What are you making your game from? So are you making from this from plastic, or are you making it from cardboard or whatever? Then there's a whole question about where you're getting your game made, with regards to environmental stuff because of shipping. So does it take loads of airplanes flying around the world, or loads of shipping miles, or whatever, which is a a real consideration. And then there's a third point there, which is also about where you're getting your game made, but is to do with the people who are making it. What rights do they have?
Fair labor and
I mean, what union rights do they have? There was a bill a few years ago here, which I did a lot of lobbying work on, which was the Modern Slavery Act, and that demanded that companies find out where their supply chains are, and they look back and they check that there's nothing in their supply chains. And certainly when I was getting the copies for Disarm the Base, then there were moments when I was like, hang on, where am I going to get this made? Who is going to make it? Because there were some factories I contacted in China who I was thinking, I have no idea where they're coming from. And I lobbied on this legislation. How can I not be trying to follow the spirit of it? So that was a real thing where I was like, I've got to make sure that it's done, by one factory there, that they're not doing lots of outsourcing to other places where you can't follow the supply chain. It's that's
a really good point. And I think so the thing that and our other question we were going to ask is, what would we like to see more of? And my answer to both of the questions is kind of in the same thing. I am so pleased to see that, again, all the things you're talking about, that we're talking about these political issues, even in terms of just general game design, and also the sustainability issues, but also accessibility. So you and I just had a conversation about color blindness. But there are other accessibility issues as well. I even would say cost is an accessibility issue. I also play here with disabled players, including my father, who only has the use of one hand. So accessibility is an important thing to me in terms of disability gamers. And I think that the industry is becoming more and more aware of that. As we move forward, and I think we're seeing, and I'm so jazzed when I see somebody come in who says, I have a disability and I'm making games and I want to make them accessible to other people. I love that. And then on the kind of cost, so this is like a spectrum, right? And I think representation is also accessibility, but also on the cost issue, I love seeing like game libraries, and I love seeing game groups like Femi's group in Nigeria and various other groups where they're bringing games to people who won't be able to afford, a $200 Gloomhaven, but they can sit at the table where the game cafe or whatever already owns the games, and they get to have that opportunity of playing this amazing range of things. And I still think we could do better. I think accessibility could be something. And I think sustainability and all of the other things we've talked about, we could do better.
Yeah, we can always do better in representation, particularly, when you've got a fantasy setting, there's no excuse for not including people. Like, you think about the Greek and Roman gods, and there are disabled Greek and Roman gods.
Thank you. How can you not know about Hephaestus, right?
Exactly. It's this thing where it's like, look, cultures have been including this from the very beginning. I think, many cultures have at least one divine, being with, with very human, physical things, or very human, mental things, or whatever. Just because we have this funny 19th century ideal of everything being perfect, it's really not.
Right, it's not. Well, and Mushy Math had a question, I think, for you. So Heather, if you want to stick that back up here, do you know of manufacturers that are making an effort around transparency about their labor practices?
I know that, let's see, Green Box Board Games. I'm not quite sure. It's part of Asmodee, because everything is part of Asmodee. They're doing something there about, especially around sustainability. Labor practices. I know when I was talking to, there's a recent Kickstarter which is going to be launched, I think, in the next couple of months, which is called The Earth Rising, which is by Stop, Drop and Roll. They have, they had a whole load of things around labor practices and where they were buying their game from. There probably are a huge number. The things that I'm looking at have mainly been UK based. So I do know that there are some people up in Glasgow, I think, who are looking at this, led by I'm not quite sure who, actually, possibly led by some of the people who did the Alba book. Anyway, so that's a very long-winded way of saying that I have some vague memories, but I don't actually know any names.
Yeah. Well, and I also think from my limited experience doing some research into this, that even if you are going to, say, go to China for your manufacturing, a lot of these companies are independently owned, and you can just flat out ask. And I felt like, from my experience, and yours may have been different, but I felt like from my experience, I could tell when somebody was trying to pull something over on me, and when they were like, I do this work, my family does this part of the work, and my employees get paid this, that I was like, I feel good about that.
That's what I asked for Disarm the Base. So I asked pretty much those questions. Went to someone in Hong Kong, and they showed me pictures of the factory, and without going there, you can't tell.
Right.
But you can tell if somebody is, if somebody is genuinely trying to, to give you an answer versus somebody who's trying to pull the wool over your eyes.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd really like would be I'd like to see more small games, and I'd like to see more things, which just have themes which were more activist, things that make you think. But I mean, small games in particular, so I'm busy.
Yeah.
So I'm making a medium-sized game, which is Library Labyrinth,
right?
While saying we need more small games. So
well, is your game
I still have a game
competition?
Jam, yes.
Is the jam still going? Okay, pitch your jam.
The jam is still going. So you have until the 21st of June. So that's 12 days. 12 days, people. So this is a game jam, which is called Small Game, Big Theme. So go check it out. Go to dissentgames.com. There's a post on there about Small Game, Big Theme. Basically, there are 5 themes to choose from. They're all quite activist. You can choose one of. So one's a sort of logistical challenge around possible spills and earthquakes. Move the oil tankers. One is about voter ID, which is big in the UK right now. We don't want it. We don't want it.
We don't either.
One is about One's about computer says no, basically. The automated decision-making process. One's about representation, and the 5th one is about building non-violent protest movements. But you have to make a game, which is on one of those themes, but it has to be a really small game.
Yeah.
So a postcard or a roll and write or something that you could basically put in a some small envelope. Some small envelope, you send it off to someone. So, you can include some coins or a couple of badges or, some counters of some sort. Maybe it's a 20 card game or something, but basically not anything big.
Nice.
But come and join in. It'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to see more of this kind of thing happening. And of course, I'm like you. I see everything being political. I agree. The personal is political. I stick a little bit of some sort of big topic or big issue into even my silliest games like Dinofaria, just because I think that's our whole world, our whole life. Everything in life is political or is a justice issue or is related to something. And we have an impact on the world around us all the time, no matter what we're doing. And so, I'd love to see more. I'd love to see more game jams that are like, let's take on this topic. Let's take on this issue. Let's, use games to get political or
let's teach something. Let's use them to raise awareness. Because people might just come away with one key idea going, oh, yeah, that's really interesting. What I'd love would be for protesters to use, postcards. So those various things you get inside, magazines or whatever, and it's here's a postcard about something or whatever, and I'm like, hey, can we put games on them? I'm sure we can do. We can do environmental games. We can do all sorts of things. Postcards are it.
Yeah, that's such a great idea. Oh my goodness. And I'm already doing so many jams and so many I have so many things in June. June, why? There's
June
so
is
much
the month
happening
of everything.
So
everything happens in June.
6 of me to be able to do all of the things, but I'm like, now I have an idea for a postcard.
Hey, this summer has just been hectic, hasn't it, so far? And we're only a month into summer.
I know. It's so funny. Well, the remover says, I think exactly what you and I believe. Neutrality, silence is political. I'd rather say something intentional. And thank you for saying that, because I get in trouble a lot of times, and I know I make people angry sometimes, but I'm not going to back down from saying that, everything is political and we have to take those stands.
We have to take the stands and we have to learn. We have to be there, and that's part of our Mighty.
Oh, John Du Bois, I love this. Social justice in space. Yes, that's so great. I want
Yes.
to do social justice in space.
The Tessa Collective. The Tessa Collective have one about space cats fight fascism, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll go
and
check
John is talking about the Button Shy jam, which is for the con that we're in right now, which is really cool. And one of the themes is space, but it's not just space; it's space.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I was there last night for they were rolling the dice to decide what they were going to do. But I agree. I think that your jam and the Button Shy one could be very compatible.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. So yeah, supposing that you've been thinking of a great idea for Button Shy, but you're then like, oh, it won't quite work, or it doesn't quite, come check mine out. You might be able to submit exactly the same thing, or get slightly different ideas. Because the thing is that a lot of the people I talk to, we're more activists than game designers sometimes. So yeah.
Well, Jess, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I'm glad that we got this opportunity. Thank you, Unpub, for letting us be here as a part of NunPub 3. Heather, thank you so much for being in the background and helping us with all of the getting stuff up on the screen and helping Jess come in and out.
Do the thing. Yeah, exactly. Because I've just been, I don't know if I'm coming or going. This is like a revolving door.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you everyone for showing up today. I feel like it's an important topic, and I really appreciate that we had the opportunity to talk to you all about it today.
Yeah, it's been great. So thank you, everyone. So, do we just wave bye-bye and then that's it?
I guess we do. Goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you around the con on Discord.